emodels.co.uk. Make something awesome. Hey everyone, it's Foxx from Model Making Guru here. Hello and welcome to the latest episode in our build of the Meng Warship Builder U-Boat Type 7 Squishy U-Boat for my very good friends and channel sponsors over at emodels.co.uk, your one-stop shop for all your model making needs. Now, just to recap, we've been working on this kit using a small selection of paints. We've been using some of the Vallejo model colour paints, some of the Vallejo game colour paints. We've got some of the Ammo by MIG paints, not many, and we've got the Vallejo Game Wash Sepia Shade and Game Ink Black. And that's all we've kind of really been using. Now, in the last episode, we got all the flags and pennants done, so that is now done, ready. All we've got left to do now is paint the base and some last few bits of weathering, and we are done, so this won't be a long episode. Now, I am keeping this kind of fairly straightforward for beginners, but one thing I will use that's not included here is my wet palette. Yes, and if you want to see how to make a wet palette, made this myself. If you want to see how to make one and why you want to use one, click here. There'll be a little link there, and that should take you to my little video. It tells you how you can make one. Only costs you a few quid, but it'll make your painting life a lot easier. If you've never used one before, I do strongly recommend one. Anyway, without further ado and less waffle, I'll get the scruffy painting mat out and we'll get the last few steps done. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is get these two attack periscopes painted, and that's going to be just fairly straightforward. We need to kind of make it match the rest of the ship. Ship, that's not the right word, is it? Teddy be telling me off right now. The rest of the boat. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go in with some chainmail silver, Vallejo game colour 72053. Now the bit I'm going to paint silver is mostly the central part here, but I'm going to go not too carefully on the other bits. Not too worried right now. This is just the metal bit that's exposed. Now the colouring of these can vary. I'm just kind of making this up a little bit in my mind. So I'm making it out that the upper and lower parts will be the same as the hull colour, but this bit, the bit that goes up and down, will be bare metal, and probably shiny bare metal. So I'll get these painted and then we'll move on to the next colour. Might take a couple of coats of this just to make sure, because it's going over black. A couple of coats will probably be needed to get a nice solid colour, and I'm not worried if I get some on this easy line thread. Okay, once the chainmail silver is dry, we need to move on with neutral grey with 70992 Vallejo model colour this time, not game colour. And we're going to paint the very top bit and the bit where it joins into the deck there. These are the bits that would be painted the same as the whole colour. Now, as always, I'm not thinning these with extra water when I'm brushing these. Whenever you brush paint, you want to use some slightly thinned paint, but I'm not thinning it manually with water. I'm using just the moisture from the wet palette, which is why I use a wet palette. It leaves you moist enough, well, it doesn't leave me moist enough, matron. It leaves the paint moist enough and hydrated that I don't really need to thin most paints. So I'm just going to get this top and lower half painted, and then we'll move on to the next step again. Okay, so once those are dry, we need to start making them blend into the rest of the boat. For that, we're going to do a black wash. We're going to use the Vallejo Black Game Ink. Now, as I've explained before, inks themselves are very, very dense pigment. So if you just put it straight on the model, it'll just make everything go black. What you want to do is you want to dilute that ink down quite a lot to make it more like a wash. And don't use water, because water changes the way it works. It affects the surface tension. It means it goes patchy and bitty and dry. You want to not thin it, which is what you do with water. You want to dilute it, and for that we're using Vallejo Glaze Medium, which is basically paint with no pigment in it. And it's going to be like 3 or 4 dollops or brushfuls of the glaze medium to 1 brushful of the ink. And we're just going to quite simply be applying this to the whole of the attack periscope, right from the top to the bottom. I'm going to be careful not to get it all over the deck, because that's already the right colour, but I want to get it on the periscope. But yes, dilute it with glaze medium. Don't dilute it with water. It just changes the way it behaves. Okay, and with that done, what we need to do next is, just before we go and do any further weathering, it's looking a bit dark now. I want to bring it back just a little tiny bit. So I'm going to do some dry brushing. I'm going to go back with the neutral grey that we did the original base coat with. And I'm just going to very carefully dry brush it just to pick up edges. I'm not going to be changing the colour. I just want to try and hit some edges, like the edges of these vent holes and things like that, just to give it some definition. So I've got some here. Now, as I've explained before, when you're doing dry brushing, don't be using the paint on your wet palette. I've got it on a piece of card. Just going to get most of it off on the tissue here. So I really don't want anything, almost nothing at all on the brush. I'm just going to start my way around, just trying to pick out any edges and raised areas, just very, very lightly. It's probably going to take me a while on the light grey areas, just to try and hit any rivets and edges and things like that. I'm going to use sort of circular motions to try and get most of the edges, but I don't want to discolour it. I don't want to make the whole thing look light grey again. I want to really just try and catch any edges. So I'm going to work my way around, not on the dark grey areas, just on the light grey areas. Okay, so that's been done. You can see it's very, very subtle. It's probably not even noticeable, let's be really honest, but I know it's there. Now, next up, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to do a wash, but we're going to do a wash that's paint and water. So what I've got here is a little container, and we've got some of the Ammo by Meg Shadow Rust, AMIG 043, and water. Just a couple of drops and water. Now you might be wondering, given everything that I've always said about, you know, mixing a glazed medium of some sort in with your paint so that the paint still behaves and doesn't go all tide marky and water marky, why am I making a wash out of water? Well, because I actually want that in this case. What we're going to do is an overall rust wash, and what I want is a kind of patchy effect, just to really enhance the idea of it being rusty. And at in this way, by using water and not thinners or glazed medium, I can actually take advantage of the way that the water will break the paint down and make it behave. And it's going to be subtle, so let's get that done. So you could just do this with thinned paint if you wanted, but I want it to... It changes the surface tension, it changes the way the acrylic binders work, and it just makes it work in a wholly different way. So it will collect around edges and things like that, but it will also sort of behave differently. Now it's going to be a very weak, very almost invisible wash, which is why I'm being really generous with it. Also, given the fact I've not used any thinners, it's just water and paint, I'm not having to worry about the fact that I haven't varnished the model to protect it from the thinners. I'm just getting it on there. Now for this part, I'm really just going to focus on the light grey area, so things like the upper hull, the cowling around the weapon here. I'll probably actually take that off and do that separately because it's a bit of a pain. Let's get that off. You can go over there. Go away. So yeah, the tower, I'm going to do the bits of the hull here. Hopefully you can see that. But I'm not going to really focus on the deck because that'll get a different wash. So on the hull here, I'm going to be really generous. And you can see the way the water is kind of beading up. That's what you don't get with glazes. You don't get that effect. Now what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go, if I can avoid it, I'm going to try and make sure I don't get the rust wash below the waterline, which for the sake of argument here, we're going to make the demarcation between the upper and the lower hull. Because the lower hull, that was anti-fouling paint, that's why it was a dark grey colour. The upper hull was light grey and wasn't necessarily the same paint. And like I've explained before, you don't get really a lot of rust below the waterline unless it's in, say, dry dock. So I'm going to do this. It might take a few coats, but it really is a case of being super generous and just letting it pool up where it wants to get a kind of rusty build-up effect. Hard to explain. I'll show you when it's done. Okay, so that's been done, and hopefully that was about 3 coats. I did 3 applications of it and let it dry between, and you can see hopefully the kind of effect I was going for is this kind of staining patchy effect, where it's not just really obviously all the way along, say, any raised edge. It's not following any sort of, you know, surface tension lines where the fluid would collect. It's just kind of almost random, and because I thinned it with water, of course the surface tension is different. It tends to, the surface tension breaks and it forms into little patches, and that's exactly the effect I was looking for. I say you could do that with glazed mediums or with thinners, but it wouldn't have that effect. This kind of faded, almost dry brush look. If you did that with glazed mediums or thinners, it will just hang around that little ridge there and make a line of the colour, it wouldn't give this patchy random effect. So sometimes it's good to use water as a thinner, especially if you want that specific kind of effect. If you're doing dusty effects as well, if I was doing like a dust colour, you could also use the same principle there to get a kind of dusty patchy effect. Really, in reality, what you're doing is, because it's really transparent, you're building up slowly, it's technically a glaze, but you're doing it in such a way that you want the randomness, and it does come out lovely and dry looking. So that is done. Now the next step is to do another one, and for this one we're going to use Vallejo Game Colour Grey Green, and I've got another one mixed up here. It's just water and the grey green, and this is going to be for under the water line. So it's going to be this area here underneath the water line where you're going to get algae and scum building up. So there's two steps to this sort of thing. We're going to do the general greeny tinge, and we're also going to put it on the deck as well, because remember the deck was wooden, or it was covered in wood slats, and it was covered with a preservative, so it's going to have an algae build up, and we're going to do it on the deck, and we're going to do it on this part of the hull and this bit here where it was not just the normal paint and anti-corrosion surface. So exactly the same again, we're going to get this on here. For the deck, we're just going to focus on that hair sticking out the end of my brush. Thank you. Get off. Hang on. Hang on. There we go. We're going to just simply apply it on here. Now, this is very thin. This is really thin because I want to be able to... I don't want it to suddenly make my deck go bright green, so it's going to be built up really slowly. So we'll make sure it goes on here. And then also, as I knock the camera, we're also going to wash it over this section here. Anything that's the German grey colour, because that's where we want to suggest a green build. You see the way this is going into little blobs? This is exactly what I'm saying about surface tension. A glaze with glaze medium or thinners wouldn't do that. So I'm going to get this on. I'm going to keep an eye on this one though, because I don't want obvious blobs. I want it to kind of be very faded. So I might do a side at a time, let it dry, keep working it around as it fades away, and just make sure I don't go too far, because I don't want to go too far with this. I don't want to make it green. I just want to give it a green tinge that tends to collect around edges and lower surfaces. Okay, so once that's dried, you can maybe see on camera. It doesn't really come out on camera. I can see it in real life. There is a green tinge to some of the panel lines and some of the edges. It's not really evident on camera. The colours don't do it justice. You can't really see it, but it is there. You can just about make it out. Maybe a bit better on that side, I don't know. It just adds to the random patchy nature of it. Keep in mind, of course, it's still kind of shiny on here because we've not matte varnished anything yet, and that always makes things look terrible anyway. But that does lead nicely into the next step, which is to do the grass skirt, or the grass line, or the scum line. It's basically a line of algae and plant life that grows just below the surface of the water, and it kind of averages out to a line where typically the water line would normally be. It obviously varies in real life, but it basically adds up over time to make a sort of scum line. And for that, we're going to use the same colour again. Now, I do apologise, I gave you the wrong colour green. I said it was grey green or green grey. It's easy to get it the wrong way around. It's not. It's goblin green. It's game coloured goblin green is the one I'm using. So I do apologise for that. But we're going to use that same colour again, and we're going to do the scum line, and we're going to use a dry brush technique again. Again, I've got some on my brush, but I'm not using my wet palette. I'm not storing it on my wet palette. It's just on a piece of card off to the side. And I'm making sure we get most of that off. And the trick here is you want to start off by just doing a nice, reasonably straight but not too crazy straight line. The grass skirt or scum line could be quite wide, could be quite a deep and sort of wide thing, so we're going to start off with a very lightly dry brushed scrabbly line that's almost imperceptible, but that just follows a line round the hull. Once that's done, you need to go in with a smaller brush and do the same again, more dry brushing, but this time focus it just towards where you want the middle of the scum line to be. This is where the algae and stuff will be most dense, and this way you'll have a bright strip down the middle, or rather a brighter, denser strip, and it'll fade away above and below. I'm using small circular motions and a small brush. Once that's been done, we need to go in and sort out these antenna cables. Remember, we've got the steel antenna cables, which are effectively steel, And we've got these cables here, which will be technically rope or cord or string or whatever the guys had to hand to tie up the pennants. So for the steel cable, we're going to go back in with the chainmail silver, and we're just going to get the paint on the brush. I'm going to take most of it off, do it on my hand, and we just want to run it along the thread just to make it not just black. Basically, we're not wanting to completely repaint it, we just want to make sure it's not just black, which looks a bit weird. Now this obviously will get matte coated when the varnish goes on there, but that's fine. We're not looking to have a shiny metallic cable here. So I'll just work my way around these. And then for the rope between the periscopes, we're just going to use khaki, game colour khaki. Carefully applied, as careful as you can. Don't worry if you get any of the khaki paint on the metallic bits here, because we've got to repaint those anyway. But just go as carefully as you can. Okay, and while those are drying, the next step is to make a start on the base, and for that we're just going to start off with some basic black first of all, and we're just going to coat the whole of the base in black. I do recommend, if you can, the golden rule, always use a bigger brush than you think you'll need, and add a little tiny touch of water to the paint, just so you can smooth it out and get a nice smooth finish, especially if you're using a big brush. Try and get one or two, well, 2 or maybe 3 coats, rather than getting it all painted in one go. Once the black has dried, we need to go over what look like the planks with, again, khaki. Same as we did on the rope, khaki for these. Just take your time, probably take a couple of coats, but just get these coated. Be careful when you go around the sides, you don't want to get paint everywhere. But if you do, just go back in with the black afterwards and touch it in. Probably take you a couple of coats. Okay, and with those painted, it's now time to put a wash over those. And again, as we've done before, we're going to use the sepia shade mixed with the Vallejo glaze medium, ratio about 50-50. Because again, a bit like the inks, the wash itself it's all right. It's just a little bit too bold. I don't want it to be quite so bold. And again, we're diluting it, not thinning it. That's why we're not using water. And all we're going to do on this is quite handily just slap it all over these planks.
Slap it on.
Now it doesn't matter. They are quite tricky to paint these, so if you haven't been 100% crispy, clean and nice straight edges on the bottom of these planks, don't worry, it doesn't really matter. Because we're going to do at least a couple of coats of this wash, and it is going to hide, when it goes down the middle between all the planks on the base, it's going to hide any little slightly wonky lines you've got, so don't worry if you've not done the neatest paint job, it'll hide everything. Okay, so that's 2 coats of that brown wash. I put some on the flags and the pennants as well, just to make them look a bit dirty and scruffy rather than factory fresh. Next up, we're going to do one little tiny wash, and this is going to be a little custom made wash with some of the glaze medium, a little bit of that goblin green, and a little bit of black, just to make a green, dirty green wash. And we're going to put that on these planks. And all we're going to do here is quite simply just brush it over. Now we're only doing one quick coat of this, so it's not going to be quite as bold as the brown wash, and it's just going to serve to give a little bit of green variation to these planks. I might dot it around like this a little bit just to make it less uniform, and it's just got that kind of, it'll just give it that little hint of green alginess. Once that wash has dried, we just need to pick out the edges with a quick dry brush of the original khaki colour. As always, we'll get it off on the tissue, and then we'll just quickly work our way around. Nothing too major here. We're just wanting to pick out the edges really, just to give them a little bit of a highlight. Nothing too major. And once that is done, I need to go back and I need to make all these little vent holes and things stand out a little bit. They've kind of faded away, so I've got some more of our black ink mixed with the glaze medium, and all we're going to do is we're just going to slowly but slowly, maybe not that much, it's a bit too much, we're just going to work our way around and just touch these into all the little recesses, and it should just be enough to make them stand out a little bit. And with that, we're almost finished. The only things left to do now are the shaft here and the screw at the back and the metallic parts for the periscopes and a little bit of metallic on the guns, and that's it. But before we do that, there's no point in doing that because we need to matte varnish this, obviously. So if I do that and then matte varnish it, it'll all just go matte again. So I'm going to get this matte varnished first, then we'll do those metallics, and then we'll be done. So I'll go off and get this matte varnished. I'm going to use my trusty rattle can Humbrol Matte 49 varnish. I can't film it because I have to go outside and do it, and I can't set the camera up outside, but it's just using the rattle can of varnish and giving it a quick blap. So I'll go and do that, and when we come back we'll do the last few steps and then we'll be done. How to apply your matte top coat. You're going to need to go outside so you don't gas everybody with the really stinky fumes. You're going to need yourself, obviously, or a suitable idiot. Yeah, very good. If you can get someone really small so they can fit in shot, that would also be cool. Can't get the staff. You're going to need your model that you're going to top coat. Yes, that's it. Well done. You're going to need some matte varnish. I'm using Humbrol 49 acrylic rattle can. And no, don't huff the matte varnish. And you may want to wear some gloves. You don't have to, but it just saves you getting your hands covered in matte varnish and then having to wash that off, which can be a right pain in the where do I get these people? Thumb in the thumb hole. Yes, there you go, much better. I don't pay him enough, or I pay him far too much. I'm not quite sure which one it is. Okay, so what we're going to do first, we're going to actually top coat the model itself first. You can see here I've got any little accessories on sticks. These are just barbecue skewers. You can't make pew pew noises when you're being silent. Thank you. They're just on barbecue skewers with alligator clips stuck on the end. Now, get your can of matte varnish, give it a darn good shake. Shake the living poop out of it. You want it to be really, really mixed. Yeah, I think it's mixed now. You could just get on with it, honestly. Now, don't press the button straight away. Press it away from the model, pan it across the model, and release the button. Again, press it away from the model, pan it past the model, and release the button. The reason to do that is that when you first press the button, you'll get blobs of stuff coming out as it's congealed in the nozzle, and you don't want that going on your model. This way you guarantee a steady flow. Let's go. Press, pan, release, press, pan, release, press. Sorry, I'm almost singing there. I do apologise. Now he's keeping it about... I'm talking in third person, it's me, you idiot. Keep it about 30 centimetres or so from the model. Go in light coats. Don't try and get everything at once, and don't hold the can in one place. If you don't think you've got enough, give it a little time to dry, and then come back and apply a second coat. But go in light coats. That way you avoid building up large amounts of varnish or top coat, and you avoid big blobs where it pools. So do a light coat, let it dry for 15-20 minutes depending on how long the drying time is for your varnish, and then have a look at it. If you think it needs more, just repeat the process. You can see here I'm doing the accessories on the sticks. Again, I'm keeping them about 18 to 20 to 30 centimeters per arm's length, and I'm doing the press, pan and release. I'm not pressing the nozzle pointing at the thing I'm spraying because I want fine mist, not blebs from the nozzle of the tin. It's kind of not very exciting to watch this, I know that. It's even less exciting for me to have watched it for the 6th time and to be narrating over it. But I make these sacrifices for you. Give it one last blast. Make sure to get it from all sides. Get it from above as well. Just giving it one last blast. I'll come back in about half an hour and give it more if I think it needs more. I will also come back and do the feet and underneath later on. Yeah, the fumes can get quite bad, that's why you do it outside. But we are job done. Okay, so the matte varnish has gone on and you can see it changes the thing greatly. It makes all the greens, well, it's kind of weird. It kind of makes the darks darker, but it makes the bright colours like the green stand out a bit more. So it makes the greens a bit more obvious, but also blends them in a bit so they look more organic, like a stain, rather than just me painting over the top. So that is now done. Only a couple of bits left we need to do now, and that is to paint the metallic parts of the periscopes and the shaft and the bronzy brassy part of the screw at the back. And what we're going to do for that is I'm going to use Vallejo acrylic metal colour 77704 pale burnt metal. I love this colour and it's dead easy. I've got some on the side here. Let me just give it a good shake first. It comes with the stirring ball. I've got some on my little bit of palette here. Now I'm not using, like before, I'm not using a wet palette for these metallics, purely because these Vallejo metal colours, they're already thin enough. You do not want to put these on your wet palette. They're already like thinner than water almost. So don't put it on your wet palette, just use a bit of card or paper. I'm using an old cup placemat. And all we're going to do is we're going to go over the bits I want to be silver. So like I said, it's the prop shaft here. Don't know if it's a prop shaft, I don't really know that's the name. And I'll do the periscopes as well. And I'll just take my time and get these all painted on. Might take a couple of coats to get it nice and smooth. We'll find out. Next we need to paint the screws, and for that I'm using Ammo by Meng Old Bronze, which is really nice metallic colour. That should make them come out quite nicely. And as the spinny thing hoves into view, that can mean only one thing. This project is completed. Yes. Now, there were a couple of last steps I did that didn't come out on camera, so I do apologise, it didn't come out on film. What I did was, once I painted the screw, I then gave it a sort of verdigris, slightly corroded bronze effect with Citadel's Nailac Oxide. I've not found anything else that looks quite as good as that stuff, but a very thin coat of that, just to give it that verdigris, tarnish, bronze, kind of copper effect. And then over the silver parts I painted, the periscopes and the drive shaft for the screw, I did what's called a magic wash, which is like we've done before when we did a wash with the ink and the glaze medium. But instead of a glaze medium, I used an acrylic gloss varnish. I use my Pledge Floor Care finish, 2 times more shine, that you know I like. But any acrylic gloss varnish will do. As long as it's acrylic, that means the paint flow correctly. You get some texture and depth, but it still stays shiny, rather than the glaze medium, which makes it go matte. But like I said, with those done, that finished the project. So everything is now done. Absolutely blast to make this kit. I've absolutely adored every minute of it. I do recommend you pick one of these up. Super simple. It's got like 6 parts or something. It's ridiculously easy to build. You can just have a lot of fun with the painting and the weathering. And you can go as realistic as you want. You can make it silly and fun and cartoony. It kind of works with either. I've gone for kind of 50-50 bit of both, and it just kind of works with either. But I hope you've enjoyed watching this. It's been, like I say, fun for me to build. Don't forget, if you want to pick one of these up or any of the products that I've used, go along to emodels.co.uk, my sponsors and the people for whom this video is being made, and pick it up. And like we always say, if they're looking for something specific and you can't quite find it, don't panic. It's probably just either out of stock for a moment, or maybe it's something they don't carry, but they can get it for you anyway. So if you're ever looking for something and you can't find it, give them a shout, drop them an email, give them a call. They'll be more than happy to get you sorted out. But until next time, I will return with the Perfect Grade Millennium Falcon from Bandai. It's going to be a while off yet, but I will return with that, and that's going to be a big fat project. So we're going to go from tiny squishy things to big massive Millennium Falcons. So that's going to be awesome. But do stay tuned, and until next time, I will say go make something awesome, go be awesome, and adios amoebas.